Hello, hello, hello. Status Coup. It is Thursday, September 22nd, the year 2022. Delighted to be joined by Tina Desiree Berg in the City of Angels. How you doing, Tina?
Good. Glad to be here. Got a full show today. Lots of stuff going
Yes.
on.
We'll be covering all sorts of corruption, injustice, environmental genocide, and then we'll move on to the right wing and
Yeah.
the shall we say, growing threat of white supremacy, and, shall I also say, Tucker Carlson, pro
Yeah.
groomer, perhaps, per groomer, Tucker Carlson. So I'm excited for that. We'll do our normal live stream, and then we're going to move over to the right wing insanity report, hosted by Tina, which I will be joining her. Smash that like button. Share this live stream so we can get this out to more people. I was live earlier today, so hopefully we can get that same audience that we had earlier. Pretty nice audience earlier today
Yeah.
for
It
the
was a good live stream.
yes, for the latest in the Trump insanity, and based on Trump's new measurement for declassification, Tina, by the end of this live stream, so in about an hour, hour and a half, I will have a six pack because I thought about it.
Right. I'm thinking about all kinds of things right now that need to happen. Are they happening? Wait, who's president right now?
Right. It is now declassified. So by the end of this live stream, I will have a six pack. I will also have a literal six pack of Kentucky bourbon
And
barrel
Bernie
beer,
Sanders will be president.
and Bernie Sanders will be president because I just think about it.
Wait.
So that's exciting. Boy, was that something. And you got to
He's
give it to Hannity, by the way. I mean, obviously he's a walking Republican press release, but to actually have a straight face, not laugh, not giggle through any of this, it's pretty big.
I honestly would have respected him more if he did giggle because the things that Trump was saying were so absurd.
Yeah, it's just insane. Anyway, so a lot to get to. We're going to start with truly, I mean, I don't know what you call this deal. It's shady, but in my view, there's tinges of corporate fascism in this side deal that was struck between Biden, Schumer, and President Manchin. We're going to get into that. The media is not covering it, shockingly. Then we're going to get into lead is everywhere. Lead in
Yeah.
Chicago's water. Lead in North Carolina. We got Flint news. So also not covered in the corporate media. We have Vladimir Putin going to call up 300,000
Reservists.
reserve
Wow.
troops in Russia as the Ukraine and Russia war continues. So we'll get into that. Protesters in Russia, which is not like protesting. I mean, here they're starting to criminalize protesting too.
There
But
is very much more criminalized, yeah.
yes. So we'll get to all that, and then we'll head over to the Right Wing Insanity Report. So let's start with the dirty deal. Now, to get Manchin's vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the severely whittled down Build Back Better plan, basically throwing at the planetary inferno a bunch of tax credits. How's that working out for you in hot LA? To get Manchin to say yes, they essentially struck a side deal at, quote,
Right.
permitting reform. And boy, I didn't read the whole bill, but just a few pages. That permitting reform is essentially giving the keys to the kingdom to the
right.
fossil fuckers.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they probably wrote this bill. In fact, I can't recall whose logo was emblazoned on the leaked draft, but David Sirota reported on this. Some oil lobbyist firm's logo was right on there.
Absolutely. So I want to, there's a lot in this bill. There's big picture stuff, which we'll get into, but I want to get to one specific item because Manchin has been pushing for the Mountain Valley Pipeline in Virginia and West Virginia. It's basically been stuck in the courts, been blocked. A lot of climate activists in Virginia and West Virginia have been fighting this thing for years. The first story we covered on the ground for Status Coup was the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It's a natural gas pipeline that essentially is going through the steepest slopes in America. If and when it explodes, it could kill a lot of people, which we have a clip we'll show in a minute. It's totally unnecessary. There's not like a demand for more natural gas. It's just a boondoggle for Dominion Energy, which owns Virginia and Virginia's politicians. And Manchin wants it because his donors want it. So this bill, I've actually never seen anything like it. So I'm just going to read the language because it's really something. Now, page 87, Colin, if we could go to the bottom. The biological opinion and incidental take statement. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretary of the Interior shall issue a biological opinion and incidental take statement for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, substantially in the form of the biological opinion and incidental take statement for the Mountain Valley Pipeline issued by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service on September 4th, 2020. Essentially, this bill is telling the Interior Department to copy the pro-Mountain Valley Pipeline statement that the United States Fish and Wildlife Service came out with in September of 2020. Now, the language, it's a bill. It might be a little boring, but we'll get to the good parts here. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, not later than 30 days after the date of this act, the date of enactment of this act, and again, this is the bill for the, quote, permitting reform that Manchin wrote, i.e., whoever his fossil fuel donors wrote.
Exactly.
The Secretary of the Interior shall issue all rights of way, permits, leases, and other authorizations that are necessary for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, substantially in the form approved in the record of decision of the Bureau of Land Management entitled Mountain Valley Pipeline and Equitron's Expansion Project Decision to grant right-of-way and temporary use permit and dated January 14th, 2021. So again, this bill is telling the Interior Department to issue or approve permits, all right-of-way permits, leases for this project, copying a prior decision. Now, an activist sent me this. Colin, I sent you this before the live stream. Tina, permit after permit after permit after permit has been denied for this pipeline because it's so dangerous. It's going through the steepest slopes in America. It jeopardizes water in the Appalachian Trail, wildlife. I mean, you name it, it jeopardizes it. And by the way, smash that like button. 100 people watching, we need more. Press that like button, share this live stream. So let me just go down the list, if you have this, Colin, of permits that have been rejected.
Oh, yeah. It's extensive.
Permits to cross Jefferson National Forest from the National Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, vacated by the Fourth Circuit of Appeals on January 25th, 2022, and not yet reissued. Fish and Wildlife Service biological opinion and incidental take statement required under the Endangered Species Act, vacated by the Fourth Circuit on February 3rd, 2022, and not yet reissued. Army Corps of Engineers Clean Water Act. By the way, the Army Corps approves every fucking permit. Vacated by the Fourth Circuit and not yet reissued. After the Fourth Circuit vacated the FWS permits in February 2022, the Army Corps announced it would not proceed with these permits, which are required for more than 400 water crossings and wetlands left to be constructed along the route, until there was a valid biological opinion and incidental take statement. Virginia State permit for Lambert Compressor Station for MVP Southgate, denied in December 2021. North Carolina Clean Water Act, Section 401, because it goes through North Carolina too. Denied twice by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Protection. Virginia Clean Water Act, Section 401 permit, issued by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality several years ago when MVP was relying on Nationwide Permit 12 for all water crossings, then lost by MVP when Nationwide Permit 12 was vacated by litigation for another project. West Virginia Clean Water Act 401, issued by West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, which isn't such a thing because they don't give a fuck about the environment there, vacated by the Fourth Circuit. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Certificate, FERC, which approves everything, issued in 2017 for 3 years, extended in 2020 through October 1st, 2022, then extended from 2022 to 2026. D.C. Circuit Court upheld 2008 certificate. D.C. Circuit heard oral arguments on challenge to 2020 extension, and we are awaiting decision. So you get a pattern here. Like
There's
5 out of 6 permits were denied.
And you know, if you read all of this, you see all of this, and Manchin and Schumer have somehow come to the conclusion that it's the Fourth Circuit Court that is the problem and not the pipeline.
Right. But literally, you have to understand, most of these agencies are rubber stamps for all permitting.
Exactly.
All permitting.
So the fact that they're not that should tell them something. There's something very seriously bad and wrong about this pipeline.
Right. Absolutely. So in the bill, going back to the bill, basically this language just does away with all that.
It does.
Reverses the rejections, and magically, as if Trump just thought it into existence, the bill gives right-of-way permits for all these permits that have been rejected. And by the way, through years of activists on the ground fighting to get these permits rejected. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, moving down page 89. Let me find it. Oh no, bottom of page 90. In general, the actions of the secretaries concerned and the commission pursuant to subsection D that are necessary for the construction and initial operation at full capacity of the Mountain Valley Pipeline shall not be subject to judicial review, meaning no court challenges to any of this. Other actions, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit shall have original and exclusive jurisdiction over any claim alleging the invalidity of this section, or that an action is beyond the scope of authority conferred by this section, and any claim relating to any action taken by a secretary concerned to the commission relating to the Mountain Valley Pipeline other than an action described in paragraph. In English, we are overruling all these courts' denials for permits of this dangerous pipeline. We're going to fast track it, rubber stamp it. So much for Biden, Schumer, Pelosi's, the climate, existential crisis, climate change. And we're going to rig the court so this can't be delayed any further with court challenges. Let me tell you something, Tina. I have a feeling if Donald Trump, when he was president, had permits denied for his wall, and then, I don't know, through a bill or whatever, a bill came out basically overruling rejected permits and saying you can't challenge it into court, how quickly do you think Rachel Maddow would have fire coming out of her ears? And CNN and MSNBC. But Biden and the pro-environment folks don't give a damn. And just to humanize this, Tina, for Status Coup viewers who have seen it, you'll bear with me to play it again. This pipeline, they're essentially creating a sacrifice zone in Virginia and West Virginia. This is a clip from 2018. I had more hair. I was a little thinner. I interviewed a mother and a daughter who literally protested at the top of their trees for a month. They blocked the fossil fuel company from cutting down their tree by climbing up it and staying up there for a month. Listen, the risks of this pipeline.
Yes, they do leak. They do explode. And the newer ones do it more frequently than the older ones. And there's a company with a horrific track record. They're the ones putting it in, and they've never put it in such steep and dangerous terrain. They've got a terrible track record, and it's the largest pipeline they've ever put in. It's going to be awful. There's no way nothing cannot go wrong.
Right. And one of the FERC commissioners, again, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, was a 2-to-1 vote, basically, to give them eminent domain. One of the FERC commissioners,
For an organization that's supposed to have five members.
So 2 seats are vacant. But one of the commissioners was pointing out they've never seen a pipeline on this scale, in this kind of land, the steep terrain. Also, when you're talking about pipelines going under this kind of land, if there's an explosion, the blast radius could be potentially
2.5 miles.
Everything will be dead in 2.5 miles. And that's all but my son. And if he's visiting, that wipes us out. I mean, my sister-in-laws both live in town, and my brother-in-laws up here, some and some not. So that will wipe out the 7th generation of Terrys, pretty much. 2.5 mile, that's all my friends, all my neighbors, and all my family gone. And the firefighters up here said, Red, there's nothing we can do. It'll take them a while to turn the gas off, so it'll be fueled by the gas. And he said, there's no way we can fight it on this steep terrain.
I mean, it's just obscene. The good news, it looks like because of Republican vengeance, this bill is not going to go through. Colin, if we could show the tweet from Manu Raju. Top Republicans indicate that Manchin's energy permitting plan won't have the votes in the Senate to be included in the continuing resolution, which is the government funding bill. Quote, between Republicans who are not inclined to help Manchin out of a bind and Democrats who are going to vote no, it doesn't stand a chance. That's Senator John Cornyn, said. So technically, it doesn't look like it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean...
I don't think... He would need, I think, 20 Republicans in order for this to happen. I don't think they've got those votes. I don't think it's going to happen. But even the fact that it even made it this far, and he had his Energy Independence and Security Act kind of circulating on Tuesday night to Wednesday, it's just, my hair's on fire, Jordan, because it goes beyond just the Mountain Valley Pipeline. They want to basically fast track all kinds of new projects this way. This was not possible before. There was it was Obama's fast track thing that he put into place. And previously there had only been one project where that was used. I think it's Fast 51 is what it was called. But under this, it would make all of these new projects eligible for fast tracking. So it would extend far beyond just this. It's absolutely horrific that Schumer would agree with this. I expect Manchin to do something like this. He is owned by fossil fuel industry. Schumer's right on his tail, though. Let's be clear. He's taken a lot of corporate money from fossil fuel industry. That's absolutely a fact of the matter. So I guess that's where he's coming from right now. But it's inconceivable to me that they would be willing to, change the fast track process, circumvent the courts, move the court. They don't want the Fourth Circuit to rule on it. They want to move it to a more friendly court, which is just corrupt. There's so many things wrong here. I don't exactly. Jordan, there's so many things wrong here. It's awful. And of course they will blame Bernie Sanders for this. It won't be revenge of the Republicans, right? It will be revenge of Bernie Sanders. That's how they're going to frame this. I guarantee it. But I have to say we're capitalist. That's just the way it is. Thank you, Nancy.
Now, sorry, I had to sprinkle in our wonderful sound effects. There's so many things wrong with this. I don't even know where to start. First of all, the fact that, and I'm not trying to toot our own horn here, how many people even know that this was the condition to get Manchin's vote for his yes vote for the Inflation Reduction Act? How many people know that watching CNN or MSNBC or certainly not Fox News, reading the New York Times, the Washington Post? How many people know what is the Mountain Valley Pipeline? How many people were informed the dangers of the Mountain Valley Pipeline? How many journalists spoke with activists on the ground, see what they think about these people being a sacrifice zone? I mean, it's incredible. They want to cover the horse race, but then when the deal struck, oh, Biden's brilliant. He ultimately got Manchin to bend and this and that. oh, we don't need to get into the details that they're going to fucking put this ticking time bomb underneath residents of West Virginia, Virginia. By the way, the Appalachian Trail is some of the most beautiful, pristine forest, water we have in the country. You have this pipeline going up, steep slopes. It definitely affects, I'm not an earth scientist here, but the topography, it moves the earth there. It's absolutely insane. And to be clear, the fact that this shows you they're not serious about the climate crisis, because methane is way worse than, carbon dioxide is bad too, but methane is even worse than carbon dioxide. And it shows you also when they went after Trump for his attacks on the Department of Justice and his attacks on norms and this and that. Look what they're doing to try and basically stack the courts in their favor to ram this through. So yes, it's a good thing that Republicans, not on principle, but just to screw Manchin, are going to block this. There's a lot of progressives too. A broken clock is right, twice a day. Even Tim Kaine, if you have this tweet, Colin. Tim Kaine, who's a senator from Virginia, he said, I cannot support the Mountain Valley Pipeline related provisions in this legislative text. Over 100 miles of this pipeline are in Virginia, but I was not included in the discussions and therefore not given an opportunity to share Virginia's concerns. Well, he also took a lot of money from Dominion Energy, so kudos to him for actually, being on the right side on this. The other thing, Tina, it's not just the money that they directly take from fossil fuel companies. The Democratic Party's sugar daddy and sugar mama is Wall Street. And Wall Street is heavily invested in all of this. You want to know how we know this? Colin, let's play up the Rashida Tlaib clip. Rashida Tlaib, I think she's on the Financial Services Committee. And she just had Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan Chase, who should have been thrown in jail for his fraud in tanking the global economy, along with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, et cetera, et cetera. She had Jamie Dimon and a bunch of other financial executives, and she asked a basic yes or no question. Are you willing immediately to shift away from fossil fuel investments to renewables? Let's take a look.
You have all committed, as you all know, to transition the emissions from lending and investment activities to align with pathways to net zero in 2050. Do you know what the International Energy Agency has said is required to meet our global 2050 net zero targets of limiting global temperature rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius? So no new fossil fuel production starting today. That's like zero. So I would like to ask all of you and go down the list, because again, you all have agreed to doing this. Please answer with a simple yes or no. Does your bank have a policy against funding new oil and gas products? Mr. Dimon.
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir, you know what? Everybody that got relief from student loans has a bank account with your bank should probably take out their account and close their account. The fact that you're not even there to help relieve many of the folks that are in debt, extreme debt because of student loan debt, and you're out there criticizing it.
Jamie Dimon. Can you guys hear me okay?
Did that clip go longer, Colin?
That was the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Well, the rest of the clip, I thought I sent the whole thing. The rest of these financial CEOs at banks gave ham-handed answers for, well, we are investing in renewables, but we haven't completely moved away from fossil fuels. So it's not just the fossil fuel companies that have bought off Chuck Schumer, Joe Manchin, Biden. Wall Street is the biggest investor in all these fossil fuel projects. When I was at Dakota Access Pipeline,
that's right, every
every bank in America was pouring money into that. We hear you. So
okay, Colin had said something might have been weird.
Yeah. So it's absolutely obscene. Take, on the bright side, it's not going to go through. But listen, Biden and Schumer promised Manchin that for your vote, we'll ram Mountain Valley Pipeline. So maybe it's not going to go through this permit reform bill. What makes you think they're not going to do some other backroom deal to ram this through, to approve permits that have been denied? And it's not just about one
They're gonna keep
pipeline.
trying.
It's not just about one pipeline. It's
No,
about
it's not.
this is the major corruption of the Democratic Party. Hey, fight Republican fascism. Hey, Republicans don't believe in climate change. Well, by doing this, you don't believe in climate change either. Maybe in theory you do, but you're not taking any actions to stop the pour out the flames.
I mean, just at the DNC meeting a couple weeks ago, the two things they were not going to vote on them. We talked to James Zogby about this. They refused to vote on making dark money illegal in the primary system for the Democratic Party, and they refused to talk about the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Like, nobody would just even bring it up for vote. That tells you everything you need to know as far as where they're headed with that. And I would add that Chase Bank is the biggest funder of fossil fuel projects. That is absolutely the case. I talked to Peter Kalmus, who is a big climate change scientist that works at JPL. He and some coworkers chained themselves to the front of the Chase Bank here in downtown Los Angeles to protest their funding of fossil fuel, issues, and it brought out literally half of the LAPD. I've never seen such a big turnout of LAPD cops.
Do we
Not
have that
even
clip?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, all across the world actually right now, in 26 countries, scientists have come out to stand against the climate crisis. With the IPCC report coming out this week, it connects the dots between the scientific community and the dire, catastrophic situation that we're in with the climate right now. And so they're coming out in force all over the world to demonstrate to us what's going on, why it's so important, what the critical nature of this crisis really is, and take a sacrifice, make a difference. And so they came out, they chained to these doors. This is Chase Bank.
Why Chase Bank of all
Chase Bank is the #1 funder of fossil fuel infrastructure and extraction on the planet. So we want to make sure that we point the light onto Chase and show them for who they are. They just don't seem to get that their money won't buy anybody food, water, shelter when the climate collapses all around us. And so we're here to say to Chase Bank, stop your funding of the climate crisis. Stop fueling this thing with your money and your pipelines.
What field of science is
Those were the climate scientists that got arrested
There's
chaining
actually
themselves.
there's more to that video. Can you play the rest of it, Peter? I actually talked to Peter Kalmus. If you want
go
to
ahead.
play it.
I've tried to do so many things
Yeah, there you
already
go.
and nothing's worked. So this is a global day of action by a group called Scientists Rebelling. So there's 1,200 scientists in over 30 countries that are risking arrest through civil disobedience.
So they're all doing this all over the world right
They're
now?
doing this all over the world today, yeah. And
Okay.
it's following on the heels of the Working Group 3 IPCC report, which says that we're completely out of time. We got to stop increasing the fossil fuel industry and increasing emissions and start coming down right now. And it's not happening. World leaders are still arguing and still pushing to expand the fossil fuel industry, which is taking us exactly in the wrong direction. We need to go if we want to have a livable planet in the future. So that's why I'm
Clearly.
here.
Also,
I'm here for my kids too.
You're for your
because-
kids too.
Yeah, I'm terrified of what's I'm terrified of even the next few years. Like the heat dome and what's happened in the last couple of years has been terrifying. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
In
until
fact,
we
that was going to
end.
be my question. Even if we stopped emitting carbon today, I think we're still facing devastating consequences, right? Like,
When we stop emitting CO2, as soon as we stop that, however hot it gets, That's basically how long it stays. So every day we wait to stop it makes it a little bit worse. So that's why it's not about net zero by 2050. It's not, forget about 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius. What everyone needs to know is that every day we wait, it gets a little worse. That's all. It's as simple as that. So we got to stop it now. The faster we stop it, the more we save. The longer we wait, the more we lose.
Scary.
I'm sure CNN, MSNBC, everybody was there covering that, right?
No, I was literally the only person there covering it, and I actually had to illegally park to even get near the bank. They had so many cops there. It was insane. I have never, even like if they come out for an Antifa thing, I've never seen this many cops. So, yeah. So obviously threatening a bank, not even like threatening them with anything violent, just doing what they did was enough to just put off the four sounding alarms, whatever, 5 alarms, whatever. What's the highest alarm? That alarm.
5-alarm fire, yeah.
5, there you go.
By the way, a lot of people in the chat are saying, Tina, you got balls of steel. The amount of treachery you run into, and asking how do you avoid depression. So maybe we'll do a talk therapy session next time.
That's a good question. I do talk to a therapist every now and then. I mean, I think everybody should do that, quite frankly.
Yeah, I do antidepressants and whiskey. That's helped me, but there's times that it lapses, and when I'm on the road, this stuff really makes you pretty heartsick and depressed. Before we move on, I want to show Mr. Manchin licking his wounds here that his bill doesn't seem to be going through. Let's take a look at poor Joe.
I got to be honest with you, I've been around for a long time in state politics and federal politics. I've never seen stranger bedfellows than Bernie Sanders and the extreme liberal left siding up with the Republican leadership in the caucus. I've never seen this happen. So it's come to me, what I'm hearing is it's like a revenge politics. And basically revenge towards one person, me. And I'm thinking, this is not about me. This is about something that Bernie has never supported anything about permitting reforms.
Okay,
Yes.
wait. Can we just stop for a second and just have a moment to acknowledge that Manchin actually said reforms? He thinks what he's doing is a reform, and that is just batshit.
Right. And by the way, the megalomaniac sociopath that basically blocked the child tax credit, not basically, he's the reason poor children don't have the child tax credit anymore,
Right.
blocked paid sick leave, blocked universal pre-K. This guy who blocked all of it, and by reports, in many cases blocked things because he has thin skin and didn't like being criticized. He's crying about revenge politics.
Yeah. It's insane. I know. It's unbelievable. It's like he lives in another world entirely. And I knew he would blame Bernie.
Yeah.
You just knew that was coming. But you know, can I point out something? What Bernie said early on was correct. This has been like a giant bait and switch, right? Because the Inflation Reduction Act, this was like, everybody was touting it as it's the best climate change policy we've ever had passed, you know, giant blah, 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 blah. And now it's been switched. We see what's actually attached to it. It's like, are you kidding me? You're not
Right.
going to be lowering greenhouse emissions with this bill whatsoever. You're going to do the opposite by fast tracking all of these fossil fuel pipelines, projects, whatnot. You're going to be adding greenhouse emissions. That is just a fact.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah, it's a mess. I'm glad this isn't going through, but that doesn't mean activists don't need to stay active because, trust me, in the cloak of darkness, late on a Friday or even on the weekend, there will be some backroom agreement to fast track the Mountain Valley Pipeline that doesn't even go through Congress. So
Right.
Stay active. All right, moving on. Smash that like button. Share this live stream. We have a couple more topics before we get to Right Wing Insanity Report, hosted by the great Tina Desiree Berg. Boy, this week's going to be good. You got Tucker Carlson being pro-groomer and loony, hateful white supremacist. His free speech event at a college campus apparently was so free that it blocked critics. So we'll talk about that. Now, you know, Tina, it's not a sexy topic, our water, but I do believe even the Bible said, which I never read, that water is life. and you need it to live. We know about Flint, which we'll get to in a few minutes, but I thought the bipartisan infrastructure deal was supposed to fix all the water in the land. I was supposed to replace all the lead pipes. And by the way, if you're watching in Chicago, I hope you're listening to this. It was supposed to replace all of the lead pipes. It didn't. Even if it did replace all the lead pipes, there's other problems other than lead in your water. But I don't see any media coverage that the third largest city in the country, Chicago, is awash in lead. Great reporting by The Guardian. Let me read some of it. Revealed the shocking levels of toxic lead in Chicago tap water.
Wow.
1 in 20 tap water tests performed for thousands of Chicago residents found lead, a neurotoxin, at or above U.S. government limits, according to a Guardian analysis of a City of Chicago data trove. And 1/3 had more lead than is permitted in bottled water. This means that out of 24,000 tests, approximately 1,000 homes had lead exceeding federal standards. Experts and locals say these results raise broader concerns because there is an estimated 400,000 lead pipes supplying water to homes in the city, and the vast majority were not tested as part of the program. Oh, that's good. Moreover, they say the city is not moving fast enough to eliminate the potential danger. The Guardian worked with water engineer Ellen Batanzo, who helped uncover the Flint water crisis, to review the results of water tests conducted for Chicago residents between 2016 and 2021. Chicago itself has never released an analysis. So that's key.
Right.
The city of Chicago knows that they have alarming lead levels, and they have never released it to the public.
That's
What do you
fucking
call
scary.
that? That's
I
called
call
a
that-
cover-up.
A cover-up, exactly. Corruption.
The analysis found that 9 of the 10 zip codes with the largest percentage of high tests were neighborhoods with majorities of Black and Hispanic residents, and there were dozens of homes with shockingly high lead levels. One home in the majority Black neighborhood of South Chicago had lead levels of 1,100 parts per billion, 73 times the EPA's limit of 15 parts per billion. Quote, there's a very clear data set here showing very concerning lead levels in Chicago, and the residents need to have this information, said Batanzo, the founder of the water engineering firm. Lead is a potent, irreversible neurotoxin with no safe level of exposure and multi-generational impacts. So let me break it down here in English, because the EPA, which is also not really for the public, for the environment, it's pro-business. There is no safe lead level in water. This EPA level of 15 parts per billion, I was shocked when I learned this in Flint.
Yeah.
It's not even a measurement based on public health. That 15 parts per billion that they say is the allowable limit is a corrosion control measurement.
Fuck.
Because they're supposed to
I didn't know
add
that.
they're supposed to
Wow.
add chemicals into water in cities around America, because the pipes bringing you your water are all 50 to 100 years old.
Yeah.
They're supposed to add chemicals, phosphates, to prevent corrosion, meaning these old pipes, to prevent heavy metals like lead, copper, other things from leaching off the pipes and going into the water, corrosion. That's what the 15 parts per billion is. So, like anything else, Tina, you know, I could two people, one person could be drinking 15 parts per billion, and for whatever reason, it not really affect them. One person could be drinking 5 parts per
cancer.
billion,
Yeah.
and it destroys their system.
That's
So
right.
there is, for children, there's definitely not any safe level of lead. But for adults, go ask the people of Flint how safe it was, even at the allowable limit of 15 parts per billion. So you think Chicago's the only city not disclosing the
No.
data?
I don't. I think we have a very serious infrastructure problem in the country with old pipes everywhere, and that this is probably more normalized than we realize.
Yeah. And the other thing also, and I've, through my reporting over the years, found this, and we broke a story a few years ago, that the Michigan Environmental Department was just cooking the numbers. They were totally cheating on the water testing. A lot of these water departments, they throw out tests that have higher numbers so they get the average down. They cherry pick the numbers, because if they're average, they're supposed to do water monitoring every year, every
Right.
6 months in some cities. If their average goes above 15 parts per billion, then action is required, i.e. money they have to spend. So I don't want to
all
scare.
about the money. It's all
I don't want to scare people, but you should check how old are your pipes.
right.
Unless you're living in a wealthy white area where they probably have upgraded, they're probably anywhere from 50 to 100 years old.
That's right.
Who the hell knows what they're adding into the water? Sometimes they add too much chlorine or too little chlorine to disinfect bacteria, to reduce bacteria in the water. And if there's not enough chlorine, that breeds bacteria. And a lot of places like Flint weren't adding enough chemicals into the water to prevent corrosion, i.e. the lead from coming off into the pipes. And by the way, we're only talking here, they only tested the pipes, the city side pipes coming into the home. We're not talking about testing of the interior pipes inside residents' homes, which, I mean, America's housing stock is old.
It's old. How many houses have been copper repiped? It's expensive to do that. No, you're not wrong on that.
I mean, in Flint, we're going to get to Flint in a few minutes, but they haven't, 8.5 years later, they have not even touched residents' interior pipes. The only homes that got their pipes inside replaced was Snyder trying to basically shut the loudest Flint activists up by replacing their pipes. And he wasn't successful in many cases. But, I mean, this is scary. I mean, neither of us have children, but if you're in Chicago, God knows how much lead your children have been drinking. And by the way, there's a lot of research and studies. Lead poisoning, it changes your behavior. Your mood becomes more volatile. They have found in areas with lead poisoning or high lead levels, crime goes up. So the Fox News talking point about, oh, look at Chicago, I'm not saying it's all because of lead, but it has to play some part if people are drinking a fucking cocktail of lead.
Yeah, 100%. It's very dangerous.
It's just crazy.
I know part of it too, Jordan, is they sold a lot of the privatization that has happened in our public utilities on this idea that if we privatize these utilities, these corporations will upgrade the infrastructure. We can't afford to do it on our tax base at this point, but they can do it. And then if they reinvest in doing this new infrastructure, they'll be able to charge more money and then they'll be profitable. There was a whole argument that transpired, 15, 20 years ago when we saw a lot of the privatizations that started happening under when Bill Clinton even earlier than that, came into office. So and none of it was true. None of it. They've just done the opposite. They've done the bare minimum that they've had to do, gouged everybody that's using their utilities. For me, I actually have the city-run water here. I pay far less than my brethren in the city that have the private utilities, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just a clusterfuck at this point. And then, part of that too, which relates to your point on the EPA, is the regulatory capture. All of these, public utilities commissions and whatnot that are supposed to be guarding against this are all stocked with people that used to work at the major private utilities. It's just a revolving door.
And all of this is going on. What is the Chicago police budget?
It's huge. Again, that's the other thing. Like it here in LA, it's 54% of our city budget. I would imagine Chicago is probably close to being the same, if not more. Yeah. Let's criminalize poverty. Let's not invest in the infrastructure or in the people that live in each city. A lot of that is driven by fear, right? Wealthy people in these cities want a robust police department because they're afraid of, their things being stolen or their property being damaged.
Well, I got news for you. $1.7 billion Chicago police budget. I mean, that was, I'm just remembering from last year. I don't know what it is now. Yeah. Maybe it's $2 billion now. I think there's a greater risk of lead attacking you. I mean, sure, there's crime in Chicago. I don't want to minimize it, but lead will do a number on you the same as getting mugged or something like that.
And 100%. And doing something about the income inequality will lower those crimes as well. But again, they don't want to do that. They don't want to invest in people. They want to just criminalize everything. A lot of the crimes that are committed are driven by poverty. I don't think that that's a crazy statement.
No, not at all. So moving on from Chicago, because that ain't the only. My wife sent me this, which is really alarming. In North Carolina,
Yeah.
3 Hamilton Hall drinking fountains found to have detectable levels of lead. So Hamilton Hall, detectable levels of lead has been discovered in 3 Hamilton Hall drinking fountains, according to a university email sent Monday to the occupants of Hamilton Hall. This is at the University of North Carolina. The fountains have been removed from service and will be replaced, the email said. The EPA requires water systems to take action if the sample has 15 parts per billion. Okay. You'd say, all right, couple water fountains. That sucks, but,
But I doubt it's the water fountains that are causing the problem. I think that the problem's much more deep.
But this is the scandal here. My wife found this. So this is from Lindsay on Twitter. I work on the floor where the water fountain had 27 times the EPA threshold. Had 27 times the EPA threshold of lead. Yesterday, I made an appointment to test for lead exposure, but today the test was canceled. UNC informed me they have stopped offering tests except to employees who are pregnant or breastfeeding.
Oh.
So they're only providing tests to women pregnant or breastfeeding. Of course, they should to women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. But lead doesn't just skip over anyone who's not pregnant or breastfeeding.
Yeah.
She goes on
27 parts, that's insane.
Yeah, she goes on to say, I haven't used the fountain since before the pandemic, but yesterday the Environmental Health Department informed me I should still get tested since lead could remain in the body. I asked why the policy had changed overnight and was told to leave a message. Someone will get back to me. They tested older fountains first because they think or hope the lead is just coming from fountains built when lead components were allowed. It's not. But they are now testing newer fountains and sinks as well, so we'll know more when we get those test results. So basically, you can't find what you're not looking for. We're only going to test women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Can we just look at how much is the University of North Carolina's total endowment, Tina? This is another tweet.
This is Raleigh, Chapel Hill?
UNC Chapel Hill, yeah. At the end of February, the UNC Investment Fund had $8.3 billion in total assets, making it one of the 25 largest college and university endowments in the United States. So,
where is their water originating from? The city, I'm assuming. Do we know?
That I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I'm wondering. I think this might even extend beyond just the university system. This might be a much bigger problem than just Chapel Hill. Meaning that the whole entire city outside of Chapel Hill, also Raleigh-Durham.
Yeah, University Lake, Morgan Creek, and its tributaries feed the lake. Orange Water and Sewer Authority owns, so they get lake water. But by the way, there's a lot of lake water that's polluted. And by the way, I covered in North Carolina years ago when I was at the Young Turks. They found PFAS in the water, which are cancer-causing chemicals that are made are byproducts during the manufacturing or disinfection byproducts.
Those are the forever chemicals, right? They're hard.
Yes. So they found that in the Cape Fear River in Wilmington, and they've found it all over the country too, including in Michigan.
Including in bottled water. People
Correct.
should be aware of that. Don't think that you're being isolated from the problem if you're buying bottled water. You're not.
Right.
Not necessarily.
So essentially, if you are at UNC and you're not pregnant and you're not breastfeeding, let's say you're an older employee, you're shit out of luck. You ain't getting tested.
Insane.
If you're a student, you're not getting tested apparently.
Because they're trying to mitigate a class action lawsuit, it sounds like to me.
You got it.
No tests, no basis. And are all these students supposed to go out, all these employees and students supposed to go out and pay for a private test?
Apparently.
In order to find out? I mean.
You know what I say, Tina? Send them.
Yeah.
You cannot find what you're not looking for. If I ever do a documentary on the water wars all over the country, that might be the title.
Right.
Can't find what you're not looking for. There is a massive water crisis in this country. It's not sexy. Like in Flint, the national media covered the Jackson water crisis for approximately 5 days.
2 seconds, yeah.
Then they were gone.
And that's still going.
Yeah,
that hasn't been resolved.
The water's still fucked there. But you got Chicago is awash in lead. Who the fuck knows even if local Chicago. I'm not in Chicago, but it wouldn't surprise me if the local news there is barely covering it.
Right.
Pretty soon, Tina, the only safe drink will be whiskey. Which
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because you can't. I mean, here's the thing: you can't boil the lead out of the water. Like you could do that for bacteria, perhaps, but
no. By the way, people
heavy
don't
metals are there. You know,
actually boil water alerts. A lot of people don't realize that when you boil the water, you might be getting rid of bacteria.
Right.
Not in all cases, but you're dramatically reducing bacteria. But if you have lead in the water, that actually
make it worse?
that concentrates it further. So
well,
when
you know, that
it,
makes sense because the evaporation and then the amount of water gets distilled down. That actually makes sense.
So in Flint, for example, when they had boil water alerts 4 or 5 months after the water switch because of the E. coli in the water, they were actually just further
Making it
intensifying the concentration of the lead in their water. So, yeah, it's a problem. But we're going to get to Russia and Ukraine next. Let's give another $3 billion to Ukraine. Let's give another $20 billion to Ukraine. It's just crazy. I feel
Instead of doing something about the infrastructure in this country, it's
yeah.
insane.
And by the way, we have enough money to do both. I mean, I don't think we should be giving more money to Ukraine for weapons. I'm fine
I
with,
do not.
humanitarian aid and et cetera. But all of this going on in the United Corporations of America, no problem. We'll empty out the fucking checkbook for other countries. It's outrageous. Smash that like button. Share this live stream. We got another topic before we move on to the right-wing insanity report. We will follow up, of course, on these issues. If you want us to go out on the ground and cover these important stories, become a Status Coup member, statuscoup.com/join. I covered, years ago, I was in Chicago, among other things, covering lead problems in Chicago.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been to Flint a shit ton. I'm actually working on a book now about my Flint reporting. I've been in North Carolina. I mean, we want to cover as many stories as we can. Money don't grow on trees, and we don't get any money from Wall Street, the fossil fuckers, Big Pharma, Silicon Valley, etc. Please support us, statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Finally, before we move on to the right-wing insanity report, as it seems, Ukraine is fending off Russia. I mean, what is this going on for 6-7 months at this point?
Yeah. With no end in sight.
Right. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Oh, I wanted to add one more thing. I forgot this. 8.5 years later, the pipes in Flint, Michigan, have not been replaced. If you can put that story up, Colin.
It's crazy.
The NRDC, the National Resources Defense Council, blasts Flint for failing to complete water service line work by September deadline. I don't have enough time to get into this, but let me tell you something, Tina. When the Flint water crisis happened, Flint is 53% black. Ann Arbor, 45 minutes down the road, where Governor Snyder lived, majority white, very wealthy, without a problem, preemptively replaced all the lead service lines in the city. Immediately.
Not shocked by that.
8.5 years later, they have not replaced all the lead service lines in Flint. And by the way, when people, when Obama stands and Democratic Party sycophants say, hey, well, Obama and Congress gave Flint $180 million. Go ask the people of Flint how much of that money actually went to Flint. Go ask them. I've been there. Very little. So this is not environmental racism. This is racism.
Right.
Straight up.
Straight
There
up.
are poor white people too, to be clear, but if this was in Beverly Hills,
Yeah, it wouldn't
Ann
happen.
Arbor, you name it, probably would have been fixed in 8 weeks. 8.5 years.
Right.
This has not been replaced. Sickening. All right.
Yeah.
So Putin is now reportedly calling for 300,000 reservists in his continued quest to basically annex all of Ukraine. Russians, and as a result, Russians are rushing for flights out of Russia amid partial reservist call-up. Large numbers of Russians rushed to book one-way tickets out of the country while they still could Wednesday after President Vladimir Putin announced a partial mobilization of military reservists for the war in Ukraine. Flights filed up quickly and the prices of tickets for remaining connections skyrocketed, apparently driven by fears that Russia's borders could soon close or that Putin could later announce a broader call-up that might send many Russian men of fighting age to war's front lines. Tickets for the Moscow-Belgrade flights operated by Air Serbia, the only European carrier besides Turkish Airlines, to maintain flights to Russia despite a European Union flight embargo, quickly sold out. So they're fleeing. They don't want to fight in this war. And protests are breaking out in Russia, which, don't get me wrong, it's no longer that easy to protest in America, but in Russia, you will be arrested. Colin, if we could show clips of some of the protests, it's in the live stream, Doc.
Yeah, a lot of people think about the First Amendment as being just a global thing, but it's not. This is something that's very unique to the United States. Not even Britain has the equivalency of a First Amendment right.
Yeah.
It's one country that we should fight for, so, sorry.
As you can see here, pretty dramatic scenes, and bear in mind we haven't seen protests in cities for the last 5 or 6 months. People have been so scared of the fact that they will be detained, and that is clearly what is happening. But this mobilization announcement has brought people out onto the streets here in Moscow, in Yekaterinburg, in various other cities across the country, and police are dealing with them very brutally. And it is extraordinary actually to see how brave people are being, to hear them chanting no to war, Nie Vojna, and to brave the police reaction. You can see that reaction. I'm not saying that everybody in this country is against this partial mobilization. I've been out on the streets talking to people today, and some people, especially the older generation, are saying this is what we have to do. We have to save the people of Donbass, and they soak up Vladimir Putin's rhetoric. But there are people, as you can see here now, who don't agree with this, who are worried about this escalation, who don't want
You there?
Sorry. That's a good amount of people.
Yeah, it's huge. For Russia, that's huge.
Yeah. And also, Colin, if you have the other tweet, you could just show.
And it's not surprising, actually. I mean, people tend to believe that groups other than the group that they're a part of are sort of monolithic in their beliefs. There's kind of a tendency towards that. So, but it's just not the case.
There's some of the photos of protesters being arrested.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, they ain't fucking around. It's definitely taking major risks to be protesting. You're not going to get out in the next day or two.
No.
But yeah,
I mean,
to me, it's tough. I mean, I don't pretend to be a foreign policy expert. Obviously, we cover more domestic issues. But to me, at the end of the day, I'm not down with these air quote leftists who seem to want to just totally ignore that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine and bombed civilian targets and definitely has committed war crimes, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that doesn't
make Ukraine's the good guy here. Yeah, no.
Right.
Listen, sometimes there are no good players in an arena.
Right.
We don't. Why is it that my thing is this? Is why is it as Americans why do we have to find somebody to fight for or to like root for in any kind of a conflict? Sometimes conflicts are just bad across the board. There's good parts of it and bad parts of it on both sides of the equation. I don't particularly think that this is a good conflict. We've talked about it before. Ukraine definitely has a Nazi problem. That's not up for debate. There's been an ongoing civil war situation there since 2014 when they had their coup. That doesn't mean that Putin's a good guy and that he hasn't also committed war crimes, though. Putin's a terrible person. His war is bad. I mean,
the whole Nazis in Ukraine thing to me has just been a red herring. Of course, there's Nazis in Ukraine. There's a military unit that is full of Nazis.
There's more than one. There's more than one military. It's not just Azov battalion. And in fact, I would say Azov is maybe a little bit not as bad as some of the others like C-14 and whatnot.
But my point is that I do not agree with just papering the whole country of Ukraine over.
I don't disagree with you.
Because that's what some, quote, leftists have done.
Yeah.
There's plenty of neo-Nazis in the United States military, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. There's a ton. Listen, everything's complicated. Everything has nuance. People tend to not want to see the entire picture, right? So, the Nazi problem that is Ukraine has been known for a long time, long before Putin has ever, even considered invading the country, right? Which is what he did. He invaded the country. We've had Nazis from Huntington Beach from here in California that have gone over there and participated with, some of the events that these guys do. They do mixed martial arts, boxing. You have a guy named White Rex who is Russian. I mean, let's not pretend that Russia doesn't always have a full-blown ultra-nationalist neo-Nazi problem. They absolutely do. White Rex, this particular guy, though, is now in Kiev in Ukraine, on the Ukrainian side, and telling his other Nazi buddies to come, be with them, because that will be the ultimate white nationalist state, right? This isn't their idea of nationalism isn't about like Ukraine versus Russia. It's their white supremacy state versus everybody else. Right. And he's getting pushback in some of the Telegram channels from Russian ultranationalists that are like, no, dude, you're wrong. Bro is how their terms they use. You need to come back to Russia. We're going to build that here. So again, these are complex things, and I don't think it's as simple as this guy's bad and this guy's good. There are a lot of bad things going on here. Well,
I also think I see this too much, where people get into this thinking, which honestly is kind of urged by certain YouTube hosts, that
I agree with you there.
You're either on this side or you're on that side. Here's the truth. No. The Soviet Union, when it collapsed, there was promises made. NATO would not expand eastward. And obviously, that was a lie. I think Russia has a right to have territorial, integrity, to not have missiles lobbed towards it from Turkey and elsewhere, to not have NATO further expand.
Finland and Sweden, it's just where's this going to end?
The United States certainly would not like Canada and Mexico to be part of an anti-U.S. coalition having missiles fired. So there's no doubt that NATO, to me, needs to be disbanded. And in the eyes of Russia, you could say NATO is a terrorist organization. So that all is true. At the same time, that does not condone launching a military invasion, which, by the way, remember,
I agree.
Putin's claim in the beginning of this was he's doing it to denazify Ukraine, not to annex and take over Ukraine. So obviously, he was as forthcoming and truthful as Donald Trump in his explanation for why. People say Ukraine is corrupt. You know what? So is fucking Russia. So is the United States. So this whole let's just focus on how corrupt and evil NATO is, and let's just totally ignore, war crimes that have been committed by Vladimir Putin. Multiple things could be true at once. My point, where I come down, bottom line, is the United States. Either we don't have to worry about how you're going to pay for it, and we could start paying for things here like roads, bridges, schools, healthcare, education. Immediately having a New Deal-like mobilization for renewable, for wind, solar, because if you could just keep sending billions every single week, every single month to Ukraine, why the hell don't we have money to fix Jackson, Mississippi, Flint, Michigan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So to me, continually sending weapons to Ukraine at this point is not meant to protect Ukraine. It's meant to make the war go longer and enrich defense contractors.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of that. I agree with all of it, actually. Yeah. And here's the thing. I feel like if you're an American and you have certain, ideologies that don't, you're against fascism, you're against racism, you want a more robust, universal health care and things of this nature, maybe consider the idea that there are people like you everywhere in every country, and those are the folks that maybe you should have unity with, and stop thinking it on terms of us versus them as far as nationalism. So there are people in Ukraine that hold those ideals. There are people in Russia that hold those ideals, and they're fighting their corrupt governments. Let's not forget that Zelensky is Jewish, and you go into some of these, Jordan, I'm not going to mince words here. You go into some of these Telegram chats with these Ukrainian Nazis, with these Russian Nazis, and they refer to him as the Jew. They don't like him.
Right.
because they're Nazis. He just happens to be president. And I think it's also part of the conversation that he is president because the majority of Ukrainians aren't neo-Nazis. But I would say the obvious, to me at least, the obvious issue here is that you don't need a majority to control dialogue. That it was true of Nazi Germany. It's true of many countries. 10% can be enough to sway something in either direction. And when you're talking about right-wing extremism, it's more than enough to, expand the Overton window, so to speak, in a direction where it becomes more normalized, right? So there is a danger there, even if it's not a majority. And that danger just isn't to, Russia, isn't just to the United States. It's also to the people in Ukraine that are Jewish, that aren't white, that are also fighting the neo-Nazis within their own government, right? So in the same way that we do, in the same way you see anti-fascists in this country fight against, some of the worst neo-Nazi elements, against some of the worst elements in the Trump administration. The same thing is going on there. That's all I'm trying to get at. So I think things are more complex than...
As we wrap this up, before we move on to the right-wing insanity report...
I feel like we already started that.
I'll just say, I don't want to hear any more from anti-war leftists who seem to be totally fine with Vladimir Putin's war. Don't fucking call yourself anti-war if you minimize, ignore Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. Russia has a right to defend itself, but this was a preemptive war, not a reactive war. Yeah. And I don't, you could cry till you're blue in the face about Nazis in Ukraine. That's all true. Zelensky, by the way, is not the hero that CNN and MSNBC and Time Magazine has made him out to be. He's corrupt. He's tried to outlaw labor, collective bargaining.
He's a fascist. There's a reason he's in the position that he is. Let's be clear on something. Just because you're Jewish, and you and I both know this, we see it in Israel, right? There is a very robust, hard right wing there. It doesn't mean you can't also buy into fascist ideals. Like, no group is monolithic.
Correct. All right, Tina, we have to move on to the right-wing insanity report. Love it. So, Tina, I give you the floor. You are the host of this program, so take it away.
I love the new graphic because it has Jared Taylor on it. I wanted to open with talking about Jared Taylor because Calvin Stewart, who is somebody I'm working with, he is a student there at the Cronkite School of Journalism at ASU. So he's been filming some stuff for me. Jared Taylor was brought in to speak to give a lecture.
Can you explain who Jared Taylor is?
I am, 100%. Let me get into that. He was brought in to do a speech on what he calls white identity, protecting white identity, by the Republican campus group there, and nobody was going to shut it down within ASU. So they ended up being a robust counter-protest. But let's talk about Jared Taylor for a minute before we get into that so people understand who he is. So Jared Taylor started like a pseudo-academic think tank. I don't know. I mean, he sees himself as an academic. He actually has a degree from Yale in philosophy. He graduated from Yale. And this was back in the 70s. And he uses his Yale alumni address to communicate with folks from his sort of, white supremacist organization. So New Century Foundation used to publish something called the American Renaissance, which was a print publication chock full of neo-Nazi articles, white supremacy articles, white nationalist articles. All the flavors of this viewpoint were included in this publication. It has now been brought online at amren.com. But one of the things that he also does is he holds a gathering in Tennessee every year, and he's been doing this for about 10 years now. Oftentimes you will see protesters go there and protest outside the building. It's very difficult to get in there to film what happens. But what kills me is that he sort of tries to frame the entire discussion from an academic viewpoint. Jared Taylor basically is what you would call a race realist, which means he believes that racism is real in the sense that there is a hierarchy to intelligence as related to race, and that there's a sort of natural tendency for people to want to be with their own kind. So these are the kinds of things that he puts forth. I think personally that this is intellectually dishonest because it's 2022 now. We have now decoded the human genome. We know that there are no genetic traits that connect, superficial things like skin color phenotypes to genotypes, which would what be your IQ would be, right? There's no relationship whatsoever. This is just bullshit. But these guys still cling to this view. It's sort of this, what I would call a biodeterminist viewpoint. It's also a viewpoint that has been put forth with people like Herrnstein and Murray, if folks remember the bell curve that came out in the 1990s that was trying to argue the same thing. So this is sort of where he's coming from. He thinks he's an academic. He thinks he can ground his racism in a form of a science that supports what he's doing, but that's just not the case. So he wrote a book in 2011 called White Identity that is exactly what it states it to be. So, just more of this white replacement theory is something that he agrees with. So this idea that if we don't protect the white race, brown and black folks are going to, start taking over, right? Which is a very, as far as I'm concerned, a neo-Nazi ideal. He would not classify himself as a neo-Nazi. He would say he's a white nationalist, I believe, because he sort of circumvents the idea that Jewish people are part of the problem. But I'm not sure that matters because he still invites people to speak at American Renaissance that are absolutely full-blown neo-Nazis. He's had Richard Spencer speak there. He's had members of Identity Europa. For folks that don't know Identity Europa, they were one of the biggest problems at the Charlottesville incident with Unite the Right, where Heather Heyer was killed by neo-Nazi James Fields. He's had Nick Fuentes, who is a Groyper. He's the guy that started America First. He's been a speaker there. He's had a Swedish neo-Nazi that goes by the Golden One. The Golden One, this guy is very much worshipped by a lot of American Nazis. He's one of these guys that, talks about fitness and spirituality as being connected to his Nazism. He's had the Ku Klux Klan lawyer, Sam Dixon, who is there almost every year. In fact, Sam Dixon regularly hosts a party at his hotel or room where he rents. So this is just to give you an idea of who this guy is.
Are hoods and robes required?
No, this is the suit and tie Nazi crowd. Part of what these guys tried to do when they rebranded themselves, they didn't want to. They wanted to be more palatable to mainstream America because there was this whole idea of red pilling folks. Like, let's kind of like rope them in little by little. And you can't do that if you show up as a skinhead wearing, black combat boots with red laces and, this kind of like hardcore Nazi stuff, swastika tattoos and whatnot. So most of these guys, you'll see them wearing tuxes, right? We're the suit and tie Nazi crowd. But, again, if it acts like a duck, talks like a duck, walks like a duck, is probably a duck. So,
right. And what do you say as far as the labels? Because he says he's a white nationalist. I would call him a white supremacist. Some would say he's not technically a neo-Nazi. I mean, how do you kind of distinguish between all of that?
I think for him, a big part of conversation within these, what I'm going to call these alt-right groups at this point, is the J question. And if for people that don't know what that is, it's the Jewish question. Jared has kind of avoided that, right? He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to bring it into the conversation. So he thinks I believe if you asked him this question, that he would say that that's what separates him from the folks that are willing to say, like, yeah, no, we have to do something about Jewish folks. They're the problem. They control the global media. They control the banks, whatever. All of the anti-Semitic stereotypes that come into your mind when you think about neo-Nazis. But again, would you invite Klan members and Richard Spencer, who has been very vocal on this, to come speak and participate at your conference if you didn't somewhat abide their beliefs, agree with their beliefs?
My beautiful wife says he usually tap dances around it.
Yeah, and that's right. He does tap dance around. So, which is why, so when you say, like, is Jared Taylor a neo-Nazi? He's definitely neo-Nazi adjacent.
Fair enough.
I mean, he's tap dancing around that, but do you actually believe in his heart of hearts that he has a problem with it? Because I do not.
Right. Got it. So he was scheduled to go to Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona State. So, there was a big argument, as there always is with these situations. There was a big argument about allowing free speech on campus. What is free speech on campus? I think ASU is basically taking the position that they are for robust free speech, and so they're going to not stop anybody from speaking on campus. That's kind of so they had sort of a laissez-faire, hands-off approach to this. But the Jared Taylor people were not allowing certain individuals to come into the forum to hear the speech, even if they bought tickets. So you tell me.
Right. I think there's an article on that we could read. Let me find it.
Yeah, there was an article, actually, I think you found. But, point being that this is very typical of this situation, right? So I would also want to bring into the conversation this idea of incitement, racial incitement. This isn't protected free speech. There is a point where things go overboard. I think we saw what happened in Charlottesville as a prime example of that.
Right.
Where do we draw the line? And believe me, I am absolutely for a robust First Amendment. I don't think we should ban all hate speech. I actually don't. I think we need to keep it to a low rumble. I don't think we should platform it. I don't think we should allow it to fester. But outright ban it, no. That serves nobody's purpose. It's best if we know what they're saying in some regards, because then we can monitor it, we can talk about it.
Yeah, let me read a little bit so people know the specifics about this event. Reported white supremacist Jared Taylor's speech at ASU draws large student body protests Friday night. Journalists, along with ASU students that registered for the event, were denied access, even though it was reportedly an event of free speech from ASU. Protesters call out ASU, as well as President Michael Crow, for their most diverse campus ever hypocrisy. And that's what, Tina, fucking makes me furious, when you have like these Glenn Greenwald charlatans pushing that like it's only the Democratic Party that's trying to attack free speech and censor. The Republican Party, conservatives, white supremacist adjacent, whatever, neo-Nazi adjacents, they're not for free speech. If you are critical of, Bolsonaro in Brazil has tried to fucking put scientists in jail, but then he cries that big tech is silencing him. So this was a free speech event, yet they weren't letting in journalists.
Because it wasn't really a free speech event. That's the thing. I mean, that's what ASU was saying about the situation. But then they're also going to say, like, well, what are we going to do if Jared Taylor doesn't want to honor letting in journalists, right? Or whatever, whatever excuse that they're using. But these guys, they don't want free speech. They just want the ability to say what they want to say and receive absolutely no criticism for it and no pushback.
Right. And by the way,
they're the ones that actually need the safe space. Let's be clear.
By the way, I think it's Ted Cruz or one of those Republicans. They have been talking about tightening defamation and libel laws for journalists, meaning make it easier to sue journalists for defamation and libel. Clearly frivolous lawsuits against journalists for defamation and libel. So much for, free speech. That doesn't mean, Silicon Valley and Democratic Party are certainly in bed. The Democratic Party is totally for, suppressing speech.
For different reasons, yeah.
Yeah, censoring speech, totally. But as you could see, these quote-unquote white nationalists, they want to hear their own voice, but they want to keep dissent to a minimum.
That's right.
Didn't we have video from this?
We do. So Calvin Stewart, I had him go out and film some of the counter protest that was going on outside of the speech. So yeah, I gave Colin the video for this if you want to play some of that.
No, use your words. We'll bring up the Oklahoma bombing. Yeah, go for it. You don't think all the violent riots after George Floyd riot were going to be $2 billion?
Did we? How many people were killed? Let me ask you this. Do you value property more than human life? Absolutely not. Okay, but yet so many far-right extremists have engaged in violent acts.
Where?
Oklahoma bombings. Oklahoma bombings. Let's bring up Waco. Okay, there's also more. What about the insurrectionists that you guys attended? That's
not insurrection. You
guys literally stormed the Capitol. You guys killed police officers. Oh, let's not. Okay, let me finish. First off, and also, after was raided, right? Didn't you guys also have a far-right motherfucker go into an FBI building and try to stop it? Oh, how about the Buffalo shooting, which is based on a replacement there, What are we going to do about it? Oh, now you're starting to back because now you know you're losing the argument, boys. Okay. Yeah, sure. I did. So sweet. Nice, man. But what will it do about it? Pretty good. What's up? Are you speaking with him? Are you speaking for him? Hey, hold up. Well, first I'm gonna finish this argument.
1 second. I need everyone to move over there so people on campus
cool.
can walk on the sidewalk. Move over.
Attention, everyone! I would just like to gather everyone's attention because I have some words I want to share with you. Personally, as a black person whose family is only here due to slavery, I find this ASU supporting this white supremacist completely violent and intolerable.
Which ones? Oh, these? Just curious, yeah. These were tattoos on St. Cumberbatch's tomb. I got these when I was in the army. I've been a devout Christian. I see. Gotcha. Thank you.
There's more of us than there are here. Be careful, dude. There's more of us than there are here.
Or what? Or what? Or what? Do something! Do something!
Just bring it back. Extend it back.
Do something! You fucking pussy! You won't do shit! You want to be shit! Make it
Trying to realize that this is only a fucking tease of, you know, what happens when the people are organized and are together under a good moral fucking cause, whereas you guys are stuck as the few.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to see the whole thing can go over and watch it on District 34. But I wanted to point something out, Jordan, that I think is part and parcel to the conversation. Is one of the guys literally says, I'm a devout Christian, right? So a lot of these guys are exactly that. They're extreme Christian Orthodox. They're Christian fascists is what I call them. These are folks that are incredibly anti-Semitic because they believe that the reason Jesus was killed was because of Jewish folks. I mean, they seem to forget the clear fact that Jesus was also Jewish. That doesn't figure into their conversation whatsoever. But, you know, and also part of that is that they want Israel to exist simply because that will bring the second coming of Christ, right? So they don't give a shit about Jewish people. They just support Zionism because they think it's going to bring about the second coming of Christ. But these people are very motivated by their religious beliefs. Nick Fuentes, who has been a speaker at American Renaissance, who we talked about for a second, and we're going to talk about more in a minute because some groypers have been arrested. But part and parcel to their conversation is that we are devout Christian Orthodox. We believe Christians are white. You know, there is a culture that's attached to that. And it sort of is also motivating why you're seeing a lot of this crossover going into like the anti-trans issues in school boards, a lot of the rebirth of the anti-gay issues that we're seeing. They're very much empowered by the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So all of this stuff is sort of conflating together at this point and making it worse, more radicalized.
Right. Well, I also think, honestly, these people kind of operate with impunity. I mean, how much media attention is on Jared Taylor or the people like him? I mean, the media covers these people when shit explodes.
Right, but not up until, yeah.
Right. I mean, aside from a few journalists, you're the only one I know that in depth has been tracking and covering neo-Nazis, white supremacists, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, 3%ers, exposing sheriffs and police that are part of these groups?
You're right, because mainly the people that work at doing this are researchers at organizations like, you know, Southern Poverty Law Center, Right Wing Watch, right? They're not journalists per se. Some of them have backgrounds in journalism, but their focus is to create research reports, not necessarily inform the general public of who these individuals are, what's going on, more or less never covering any of their actual, get-togethers. I think that changed a little bit under Trump because now it's in their face. They can't ignore that. I think the alt-right, like that terminology that came out from Richard Spencer, that sort of gave an umbrella to all of these existing extremist groups, kind of it allowed them to become more emboldened under Trump and grow in ranks. I mean, I don't think anyone that thinks they're not growing in ranks is mistaken, because they absolutely are. And I think people need to be aware of that. Again, we don't need more than 10-15% of the population to be abiding by these extreme viewpoints for them to influence our government. We've seen this clearly.
Right. And also, I wish I remember that Netflix series I told you about that episode.
Oh, yeah, I watched it. It was great.
Yeah,
She
so-
was part of the Identity Europa group that I mentioned earlier.
I'm just going to Google while you're talking.
Nora Fox. Well, no, I remember her name is Nora Fox. She was part. So Identity Europa is definitely a neo-Nazi organization. I can't remember the name of this because people should go watch this. So they interview somebody that.
Web of make-believe, death,
Okay.
lies, and the internet.
Okay, that's the name of the series. So I think it's the 3rd or 4th episode. You can bypass all the rest of them and get to this one. Because it is very interesting. So this is somebody that was behind the scenes in the build-up to Charlottesville, to the Unite the Right rally. Identity Europa, which is disbanded, was one of the bigger groups involved with that. And they're also one of the more extreme groups. These were people that were absolutely, they embraced the idea of being called fascist. She talks about being at Charlottesville at an event prior to the Unite the Right rally in which she's in a room with Richard Spencer comes in and everybody eventually starts just sig-heiling. And that the hate speech just keeps getting worse and worse, right? So a lot of these guys will temper what they say in public when the camera's on them, but when they're behind closed doors drinking and they're with their brethren, mask off. So it's really interesting when you get tidbits from folks that were in those rooms and are willing to talk about it.
Right.
Sort of like when Milo, I don't know if you ever heard this audio, I should have pulled it up, but he leaked some audio of Richard just going full hate. Crazy audio. If people haven't heard it, they should Google it. But so, again, the as bad as what their public face is, and it is bad enough. We've seen enough to know that it's bad enough. Just imagine how much worse it is when they know the camera's not on them and no one's looking at them.
Well, I think one other thing that was interesting about that, I put the link in if anybody wants to check this out. It's in the super chat to the Netflix show. It was the 3rd episode. A lot of these people that join, I don't want to say a lot, but in the case of this woman that the episode featured, they don't join because they are hateful. This girl was
she
like
got sucked in
yeah,
by her boyfriend.
Yeah, this girl, whatever, she had tough life, tough childhood. She was with a guy, she was in love with him, and she was actually initially kind of turned off by his anti-Semitism and neo-Nazism, but she didn't want to lose him, so to, basically massage his hate, she said, all right, I'll give it a whirl and I'll try this life for a while. That's how she got into it. Yeah. So it's not just people who just hate Jews or, hate black people or a lot of people.
You get sucked in. You get red pilled. They call it red pilling. So their whole point is let's red pill some normies. And, you brought up her background, and I think that that's part and parcel to the conversation. They're obviously not able to do that with everybody, right? But there are people that are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And she also tells a story in the episode that I thought was really compelling where she's where she thought she was just going to a regular party. And lo and behold, like a good hour and a half into this event, people start burning Jewish author books in a bonfire. And she was like looking around going, what in the hell is going on? Where am I? How is this happening? Right. So it's an interesting interview and episode because she walks you through how she became so radicalized. And she also brings you to the point where she had that giant wake-up call, which was because of Unite the Right rally. She wasn't there that day because of reasons that she explains, but she got a call from her mother, and her mother basically said, this is on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she felt like that was probably true.
Totally. Oh, yeah. Well.
It's crazy.
What do we got next?
All right, what do we got next? So we brought up Nick Fuentes a second ago. I wanted to point out that, so this is the first of this. So we have now had 5 Groypers arrested for their actions at January 6th. So this is the first group of America First Groypers that have been arrested. They traveled together. They were there together. We can pull up the Department of Justice press release.
I have my hand up.
Yes.
Can you tell me what a Groyper is?
I can tell you what a Groyper is. Groypers are just basically the giant fan base for Nick Fuentes. So basically a Groyper, this started on 4chan like a lot of these things did back in the day. So I'd say around 2017. If you remember the character Peppy the Frog, Does everybody remember Pepe the Frog? You
I
might
do.
have seen it flying around. Alt-right people that were on Twitter at the time in 2017. This is when Twitter had like no stop on any hate speech or anything, so you would see this a lot. But they would post this. It's an animated character called Pepe the Frog that became very symbolic of Kekistan, of Groypers, just of the alt-right belief system. So Pepe the Frog was sort of their mascot, one way to describe it. So Groypers sort of had a version of Pepe the Frog that was unique to them that they developed. But basically America First is Christian fascism. It's definitely neo-Nazism, a lot of anti-Semitic beliefs. And it was started by a guy named Nick Fuentes. So there was a group of them that appeared outside of the Capitol building on January 6th in some of the parlor footage. And you see him giving a talk. And what's really unnerving about his speech that he's giving is he hits on a lot of the same points that you and I do, and that many people that see problems within the government do. You'll see them talking about the income inequality. You'll see them talking about regulatory capture, although they don't call it that. They recognize it as being a problem. You see them talking about too much power that's going to the 1%. So they are able to diagnose a lot of the same problems that we are, but their answer to those problems is right-wing fascism. So, which is why I always try to highlight this idea that there's been no left exit to these problems. I believe strongly if we had had a Bernie Sanders versus a Trump presidency, things would be a lot different in the country right now. I do think the first step of de-radicalizing all these fascists is to do something about the income inequality and the corruption that's in our government. They have very real reasons for not having public trust of public institutions. And we see a lot of the same mistrust on the left.
Yep.
It's not without merit. But the reality is they're, for whatever reasons, the way that they're wired or the way they've been red-pilled, right, radicalized by somebody, is their solution is fascism. It's, I don't have a job because Jewish people control the media, control the banks. I don't make good money.
I wish I did control the media.
Yeah, right. I know. None of this is true, but this is the stereotypes that they've been sold, right? The George Soros stuff. I can't get a decent paying job because of black and brown people. So you go down the list. We've all heard these things that racists say, that neo-Nazis say, and they're just putting all the blame on these things. Whereas the reality is those folks are more victim in many circumstances of the income inequality than they are. I mean, these guys are white. They at least have the paycheck that's higher than, black folks receiving, 60% less pay on the hour. So it's, it doesn't matter whether it's grounded in reality. It motivates them. That's the reality. If they are motivated by their hatred, if they're motivated by the pain that they feel because of the income inequality and whatnot, that is a very deadly poison. So anyway, I sort of digress from what a groper is, but so gropers are basically white nationalists, fanboys for Nick Fuentes. That's just the terminology that they were attached to in 2017 forward. So, all right, so there were 5 of them. It's Joseph Brody, who was arrested September 20th. Thomas Carey and John Lysak was arrested September 15th. Paul Levely was arrested September 19th. The FBI was able to establish that they had been communicating many months earlier on what they were going to do. They had met actually at a Nick Fuentes event, and they became associated from that event and started going to other events together prior to being at the Capitol on January 6th. Brody entered the Senate chambers. He assaulted a police officer. So anyway, I just think it's interesting because this is the first time we've seen Groypers arrested versus, Proud Boys have obviously been out there. Oath Keepers have obviously been out there. But now we're seeing a whole new flavor of extremists. And I do think that Groypers have more openly embraced a neo-Nazi ideology versus the Proud Boys, right? So the Proud Boys are racist too, but they're not out there in the same way owning their anti-Semitism on their sleeves, right? And being proud of it. And I think part of that conversation too is, last week we saw at the Save the America rally that Trump did in Ohio, we saw everybody doing this thing, right?
Yep.
I'm not convinced at this point. I know people think it might be QAnon. I agree it might be. I'm not saying it's not a QAnon thing because they have a thing about where one goes, we all go. That's sort of a thing. But this is something that Groypers and Nick Fuentes have been doing for a long time. this one symbol. It's like America First, right? Now, do all of these sort of what they would call normie Trump people know who Nick Fuentes is? No, probably not. But Nick Fuentes, keep in mind, has been going to CPAC and has been running his America First conference adjacent to CPAC at the same time and inviting all of those people over to the America First conference. So they are being exposed to his ideology. What's also interesting about that is a lot of the Groypers have had a lot of criticism for what they would call mainstream conservative outlets. There has been a tiff with Talking Points USA with Charlie Kirk. Their beef with these guys is that they're not protecting the white race. Right? So you guys are doing your conservative
Well, I think Charlie Kirk is protecting the white race, just not as...
just not as openly as these guys would. Right? So, and on that note, there's one Groyper, another one. His name is Latino Zoomer. He was arrested recently because he had threatened one of the TPUSA folks. And apparently they felt this was enough of an arrest that he might carry it out, an act of violence. And then after they arrested him, they found, wait for it, child pornography on his phone.
Wow.
So, once again, Jordan, it blows my mind because now they're all talking about groomers and pedophilia and, blah, when half of them are in trouble for this sort of thing. Not half of them. That's an exaggeration, but you get my point. It's not shocking when you hear about one of these folks actually engaging in some sort of pedophilia. I mean, Matt Gaetz is another prime example.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you follow the trail of a lot of these high-profile, alt-right figures, and you either get domestic abuse,
there's tons of that too.
Financial fraud. It's a good grift until you get fucked.
It's literally Olympic level projection. So anyway, that I thought was an interesting development. We're now up to almost 900 individuals arrested for January 6th. I don't know where the trail ends, but it's interesting that some of these folks that they weren't able to. Oh, what's that about? Is that the fire alarm?
It's good. Keep going.
Okay, stopped. It's interesting to me. What I was saying is it's interesting to me that now we're progressing into really being able to figure out who some of the more kind of covert individuals were that have tried to protect who their identity is. That is the idea of protecting your identity has in the past been much more common with neo-Nazis versus Proud Boys, right? For a long time, Proud Boys weren't even allowed to hide their identity. The point was that they're proud, right? So they weren't masking up. They were using their real names. They were out there in the public, doing whatever they're doing, getting their tattoos. But that's never been the case necessarily with a lot of neo-Nazis because they knew that there was really some repercussions if people found out they could lose their jobs, et cetera. So things are getting exposed now. And there's also a group that's out there called Ignite the Right. They've started a website, and in much the same way that the sedition trackers are looking to try to figure out who all of these folks are, the Ignite the Right group is actually trying to figure out all of the unidentified Nazis at Charlottesville at the Unite the Right rally that has still not been identified. So it's a whole project that's been started. They're using the same sort of ideas where they're putting nicknames to photos, putting them on Twitter, saying, does anybody recognize these individuals? We found maybe this Facebook account, kind of a thing. So I think from that project, we're going to see a lot more of those folks identified.
My fire alarm's going off, so continue. Yeah.
All right, so I guess that means that you are muting your mic.
Let's get to the Tucker Carlson.
Let's get to the Tucker Carlson. This is an old clip of Tucker Carlson where this was really shocking to me. So Tucker Carlson has obviously been out there talking about the groomers, right? Because he's very homophobic, anti-gay rights, whatnot. So I want to play this clip. This is a clip of him. Wait for it.
Wait, can we play the other clip first? Can we play the other clip first? The other clip first is Tucker Carlson telling parents they need to fight against.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You found this other clip. Okay, so I found this old one. You found this new one. Yeah, Colin, let's play this first clip. Tucker Carlson is openly calling for violence against teachers and LGBTQ plus people. No parent should put up with this for 1 second, no matter what the law says. Your moral duty is to defend children. This is an attack on your children, and you should fight back. Yeah, let's play this video.
These are sex crimes, and the people committing them should be punished. Now, try and say that out loud anywhere but on Fox News. You can't. Why can't you? Because it's true. That's why. You can't say the true things. You can claim the earth is flat and no one gets exercise. But when you start saying things like all lives matter or sexualizing my children is a crime, and if you keep it up, I'm going to hurt you because I'm the dad, say that, ooh, you're done. Libs of TikTok is being banned from the internet. Why? Because it showed documentary evidence of what was happening. Some people describe what was happening as grooming. We're not exactly sure what that means, but if it's sexually abusing children, yeah, that is what's happening. But the term groomer is now hate speech, says NBC News.
A couple of months ago, these people, one is Libs of TikTok, another is Matt Walsh, you have Chris Rufo, who you just mentioned. They've been villainizing and literally demonizing these doctors who treat these people for months now. And so in that time, you can just see it in their mentions. This sicko language, I've seen it a million times over, because every time they tweet about these doctors, using these doctors' faces sometimes, and all of the comments are like sickos, demonic, satanic, pedophile, groomer.
Yeah, they're being mean to doctors who castrate children, who cut the breasts off girls. Yeah. This is not only happening, it is being celebrated and aggressively defended by virtually everyone with power. Take 3 steps back. We used to say, oh, our society doesn't care about children. That's not what this is. What you're seeing is a society that hates children. You would have to hate children in order to sexualize them, because sexualizing children screws them up for life. Ask anyone to whom it's happened. Period. No one should put up with this. No parent should put up with this for 1 second, no matter what the law says. Your duty, your moral duty, is to defend your children. This is an attack on your children, and you should fight back.
Okay, so what's amazing about this video is that apparently Tucker Carlson did not always feel this way. Colin, let's go ahead and play the older clip of Tucker defending this sort of thing.
An unusual one anyway. A lap dance in front of the entire class. Alicia Smith, pictured on the screen, accused of grinding on the 15-year-old, putting her head between his legs and fondling him. Smith reportedly admits to doing all this, but only after the rest of the class, she says, convinced her to.
Okay.
So, you know, I think legitimate opinion divides whether this was appropriate for the classroom or not. But there are people, hold on, Slay, let me finish. There are people out there who believe that there ought to be criminal sanctions brought against this woman. And I think that's deranged.
So if the class had
because
tried
there's no victim here.
If the class had tried to convict her or convince her of committing a crime like killing somebody, which you've done it to.
But this isn't a crime. That's the point I'm making. A crime suggests a victim, and
what do you
no
mean
one
there's no
here
victim,
is
though? There's a 15-year-old kid, and then you have a grown-up teacher.
There's a 15-year-old boy.
15-year-old
So
kid.
having been a 15-year-old boy, I can tell you, unless there's something we don't know about this kid's life has not been
I
destroyed.
have taught 15-year-old boys. I assure you they are still kids.
This is the
they
dream
may be
of
laughing,
15-year-old
but I assure you. I mean, you're not embarrassed?
Well, no, look, I'm not saying I want this going on in my kid's school. I'm just saying let's spare the outrage here and just be real about it. Which
What are you talking about? She put her head between his legs.
Okay, she was, acting out a lap dance.
It's just like, I don't even know where to begin with this, Jordan, because here is a guy that's basically defending pedophilia, more or less. A 15-year-old is still a kid, Tucker. Are you fucking kidding me?
Well,
and he's basically like, the kid loved it. You know, I mean.
I don't know when that was. It looks like a few years ago, but since he's now calling for an intifada against LGBTQ people and parents who mutilate their kids, by the way, the kids can't get the gender-affirming care without parental approval if you're under 18. It's not like, contrary to what he's saying, they're locking them in chains and shipping them off to Boston Children's Hospital. Right. They're giving approval. I thought the Republicans, small government, we don't want people, we don't want government involved in our families. So he's basically not even a subtle dog whistle in the first clip. Sirens, fight. You hurt my kid, I'm going to hurt you. To even though Boston Children's Hospital, by the way, isn't mutilating anybody. Their procedures are, from what I've seen, mostly for people over the age of 18. But putting all that aside, a couple years ago, when he wasn't, didn't have a primetime show and wasn't flailing as the alt-right wind blew, he seemed to be pro-groomer, I guess. Tucker, the groomer.
Yes, he was definitely pro-groomer because that's what that entire clip basically gets at. He's pro-groomer. I think the only difference here is that he's homophobic. He is anti-gay rights. So he's now making the conversation about groomers are gay folks, right? So he's making it about his homophobia. Whereas in this other case, it had nothing to do with that, right? Now he's like, he's 15. Let him have, his teacher's head between his legs and the lap dance. Like, it's fucking unbelievable. He's a fraud, but I do think what's motivating him now is his homophobia.
Right, and you want to know what's remarkable? These people are so concerned about your children, right? You hear a peep from Tucker Carlson when the child tax credit was expired?
No, of course not.
The child tax credit that gave a lot of poor children food in their bellies and poor families an extra $300 a month for food. They're very interested in your kids if they're being dragged to a drag show or, going for gender-affirming care, which their parents are allowing. But if your kid doesn't have food or your kid's drinking lead, well, that's too bad. Capitalism, So it's all a grift. They're just stoking this culture war. And I think it's gotten worse on Fox News, honestly. I mean...
Oh, I do too. The anti-trans rhetoric is really just elevating things to the next level. And I also think that's happening on the street. Like, for example, there's been a lot of these guys showing up at school board meetings because they're anti-trans. And it's not just Proud Boys. It's other groups too. White Lives Matter has been showing up. And is entirely motivated by this boogeyman bullshit of trans rights. And to the point, though, where they're arguing with actual parents who have children at these schools. None of these guys have children at these schools. They're coming from out of the area, right? They're just traveling around, going to these school board meetings and causing mayhem. And it's really infuriating to see them going after the parents that actually do have a vested interest in what happens on the school board because their kids go to the school. And in one particular, I'm going to be interviewing a gal who is the mother of a trans girl who has been facing off with these guys at her school board because they keep showing up. Every fucking meeting, they keep showing up with this nonsense.
What's also interesting to me, obviously it's different because one is changing, features in your body, but they seem to be totally fine with gay conversion therapy, which does a lot of damage mentally.
It absolutely does. It's horrifying.
Gay people that are forced into this fucking cult-like therapy to, pray the gay away or whatever the hell it is. So they're okay with that kind of abuse to children. They're not okay if, a teenage boy just, feels more connected and, wants to follow her truth to become a woman or whatever. I'm not saying, let's allow this for 8-year-olds, but, if a teenager, along with their parents, feel that they are really a boy or a girl, and after...
But here's the thing, they very well might be. I have known people in my lifetime that have been born with both sex organs. This happens.
Right.
I think the bigger issue here, in a lot of ways, follow me on this for a second. In a lot of ways, there are viewpoints on gender and sexuality, and by sexuality I mean biological sex, male, female, right? And their viewpoints on race are sort of the same. They have this biodeterminist viewpoint where these things are determined, you're hardwired for them, that's all there is. When reality is, no scientist that is worth his weight would argue this point, right? Because biology isn't hardwired for anything. There are environmental factors that come into play on everything. So when it comes to race, for example, there's no connection between the phenotypes and the genotypes, right? We're all the same. We've decoded the human genome, right? There's variation that exists. There's isolated breeding populations that exist, but none of that is related to race per se, or the visual cues that people are identifying as what race is, right?
Right.
When you talk about gender, biological sex, it's a lot of the same problematic viewpoints, right? they want to say that it's a binary thing, right? You're either male or female, but that's not true. We know this, right? So there's variation, right? X, male, female, not to get into chromosomes, whatever. And then there's variation that occurs in between, right? We have scientists that have been working on this for decades now. We also know, for example, that a brain can be sexed with the opposite hormone in vitro and at puberty, right? So maybe you're born male, but you're sexed with estrogen. So you feel like a female or less like a male. So again, there is a whole range of variation that is possible, that exists. Nobody's hardwired for this shit in one or two things. That's just not the way it is. It's same thing. So, but again, like they do with race, they think science is on their side because they believe that their understanding of science is this other thing, right? I don't know how you fix that. And let's be honest, it's not just with the right-wingers. We see it with TERFs. TERFs have the same kind of ridiculous viewpoint.
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, we should also note, and the New York Times did a great piece on this, Tucker Carlson doesn't really believe most of what he's saying. Most of these right-wingers don't actually believe most of what they're saying. New York Times did a long profile on Tucker Carlson, and guess what? People that, they interviewed people that knew Tucker Carlson for years. They said he was unrecognizable. Tucker Carlson was your country club Republican forever and ever. But all of a sudden, he gets a primetime show on Fox, and he's playing the culture wars.
Hang
and
on. Who remembers that Tucker Carlson used to be on MSNBC?
And CNN. Crossfire. Yep.
He did shows with Rachel Maddow. Does anybody else remember this shit?
Right. So, you could say, well, people evolve, Jordan. Yeah, not this much. Tucker Carlson was a country club Republican, but like so many of these grifters that rise to stardom, he saw what the political wins. He got lucky that O'Reilly got, voted off Insanity Island. And he's playing to the culture wars. He's playing to hate. By the way, this whole Tucker Carlson is anti-war. Do you see the shit he's putting out with China? He would love a war with China.
Yeah,
and Iran.
China.
Yeah, and Iran probably. 100%. So you have a bunch of charlatans who truly, do they actually believe this stuff? I don't think so. Sean Hannity, does he actually believe everything he has spewed out of his mouth after 20 years? I doubt it. More, 25, 30 years at Fox News. So yeah, but it's dangerous because you want to know something? When he does those monologues like, fight back and hurt them, well, there's a lot of, 2.5, 3 million people listening, mostly old people, watching Fox News tonight. And a lot of them are going to take that and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to go to Boston Children's Hospital. Right. Or I'm going to go to this, LGBTQ.
Or I'm going to go to it. That's right. And bring a gun. Or I'm going to go to a synagogue and shoot people. Yeah, no, it radicalizes people. And we see the same thing going on also, not just with networks. We see it going on YouTube, too. I don't believe that all of these folks that do these commentary shows actually believe all of the rhetoric they put out. I think they get a little taste of a bigger audience.
Yep.
They get a little taste of some money coming in.
There's a lot of money to be had on YouTube to play to the right. To play to the right way.
To play to the right, yeah. And in fact, it kills me. The most views that you will see happen go to right-wing extremist stuff.
Oh yeah.
Every time.
I remember I don't know, a couple months ago I did a thing on Hunter Biden, not to play to the right wing, just because I thought it should be covered. And boy, did my audience go way up. But then, I think I had 500, 600 people live. But then after I said, he needs to be indicted, and then I started turning on Jared Kushner and Ivanka, who probably committed crimes. Kushner had that $2 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, and all of a sudden the viewership drops off. So it's all tribalism. They want to go after the other side, but there's no consistent principle there. Oh, Jared Kushner, Hunter Biden, lock him up. But Jared Kushner, no, he made his money the right way. So this is the problem with YouTube. And media in general. It's created this partisan tribal bubble. Nobody has any core principles anymore. And to have core principles means you're going to get less views. And you want to know something? I'd rather have less views.
I'd rather have less views too. I'm with you on that. I can't. And I think a lot of it too is related to QAnon, why we see all of that crazy stuff going on. They're not anymore because they've taken a lot of them offline. But there were a lot of QAnon channels that were completely devoted to analyzing Q drops. That was their channel. So if Q did something on 4chan or 8chan, they would jump onto YouTube, onto the live stream and be like, okay, what is he saying here? And, you know, trust the plan and the number 11 or number 17 or, you know, whatever crazy thing. And these things had a ton of views. I mean, I don't know that if all these people doing these shows actually believed in this stuff or not, but they didn't care.
Right.
You know, they had 2 million views.
Absolutely. Tina, it's getting dark and I have to walk my dog.
It is getting dark, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me on the Right Wing Insanity Report. I know you got good stuff coming up also.
I do.
Next week.
So I'm going to be interviewing, everybody will want to see this. I'm going to be interviewing Daryl Lamont Jenkins. If you don't know who Daryl is, he has been fighting with right wingers for, God, I want to say 20 years. I think the first time I was aware of him, he was on the Montel Williams show. That's how long he's been doing this. So the older folks will know who Montel Williams is. But, you know, he has faced off with just about all these guys, from Richard Spencer, Matthew Heimbach, whatnot. So we're going to have him on the show. He's going to give us some great video that we're going to, you know, take a peek at. He was at Charlottesville at Unite the Right. He goes to the American Renaissance Conference every year to counter-protest Jared Taylor, so they're all aware of who he is as well. So he's an interesting guy. He's made a lifetime out of fighting with these guys, fighting against these guys. So he knows this world better than anybody.
And we'll also have video of Tucker Carlson participating in the drag show. That will be coming up. So I'm kidding. Maybe
no,
I'm not.
Somebody should make that video. It'd be hilarious.
Absolutely. But everybody, thank you for watching. Let me read some super chats. Lisa, 1999, love y'all. Love you back. Humorous, $10.
Humorous.
Food, water, shelter, housing, clothing, electricity, and healthcare should be unalienable rights to citizens in America, all taken care of by the U.S. government. You're damn right. But we don't have a government. We have a multi-trillion-dollar corporate conglomerate. It's called the United Corporations of America. Annette Worley, 1999. Thank you so much, Annette. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. And Tina, keep fighting the good fight. Our official Nazi hunter.
See you guys next week.
All right. Take care, everyone.